Hello everyone! Again, I'm Atty Mayelle and you are watching Lawfully Pink. Masyado po tayo mahaba ang ating pahinga dahil po nawalan ako ng pilik mata. Okay, pero nagbalik na sila at game na tayo dahil natatakot ako baka hindi niyo ako makilala sa pag ako ay naglag ng walang pilik mata. Joke lang. Pero anyway, I'm so happy to be back and I gained a lot of weight kasi ang dami kong kumain. But thank you God for blessing us with food to eat, okay? And still continuously praying for the healing of our land and for the people greatly affected ng ating pandemic. We really pray for protection and ng mapagtagumpayan natin to in God's name, in Jesus' name. So before anything else, okay, we would be discussing now yung, kasi madaming nalilito sa legal separation, sa annulment of marriage, sa declaration of nullity of marriage, ano ba sila, so ano ba yung mga grounds, okay? So ito po, we will be discussing them one by one, separate episodes, pero ngayon, unahin natin yung annulment of marriage. Before that, I would like to promote yung hot sauce, okay? Ang haba kasi ng name, pero masarap siya. Okay, by Hellavegan, hot damn roasted chili sauce. Okay, ang sarap-sarap niya talaga. And this is vegan, so this is very healthy. And this only costs 350 pesos. And if you are interested, I will post the link of their link kung sa and their telephone number on the description section. Okay, so you could reach them and order. Meron din silang mga cookies, bread, and many more. Meron din silang chinelas. Okay, so eto, I would like you to try this. It's so good. Kanina trinay namin sa lasagna. Ang sarap niya kasi mahilig kami sa maanghang. So, dito lang siya. Kasama natin siya the whole episode. And this is again, Hellavegan. Okay, Hellavegan. H-E-L-L-A Vegan. P-H. Okay. So, moving on. Ito na nga, ang annulment of marriage. Ano ba ang mga grounds ng annulment of marriage? Gusto ko muna malaman ninyo kung ano yung difference ng legal separation and annulment of marriage. Okay? So, titingin tayo sa aking kodigo. Okay? Ang annulment of marriage, the marriage was defective at the very beginning. Okay? So, may defecto na siya at the very beginning. While in legal separation, there was no defect in marriage. Perfectly valid ang marriage. At the time that, at the beginning, the very beginning of the marriage, okay, at the time that it was celebrated, there was no defect at all. Next, the cause for annulment must be already existing at the time of the marriage. So yung defecto, again, dapat nag-exist na siya at the time of the marriage. Whereas, as opposed to legal separation, the cause for legal separation arises only after the marriage was celebrated. Okay, lumabas na yung mga grounds for legal separation after the marriage was celebrated. Next, in annulment of marriage, there are 7 grounds, while in legal separation, there are 10 grounds. Okay? And sa annulment, ito very important. Ang annulment, it dissolves the marriage bond. Okay, after that, the parties are free to marry other people. While in legal separation, the marriage remains. Ang effect lang nito is, maghiwalay lang kayo bed and board, but you remain to be married. So, let's discuss first the grounds for the annulment of marriage. So, ang unang ground is yung the party or both parties are above 18 years old but below 21 years of age, okay? And then, kasi kailangan, pagka below 21 ka and above 18 ka, kailangan ng parental consent. So, kung walang parental consent, okay, kung walang parental consent, voidable ang marriage. Kung wala naman yung parents, may legal guardian. Okay, kung walang consent ng legal guardian, voidable pa rin ang marriage. For example, si lalaki, 20 years old siya. Pinakasalan niya si babae na 22 years old. Si lalaki, since he is 20 years old only, okay, even if he's of majority age na, but he is below 21 years of age, under the law, kailangan niya ng parental consent. Since pinakasalan niya si babae na age na 22, si babae na 22 years old, pero walang parental consent, voidable ang kanilang marriage. Okay? Sino pwedeng mag-file ng annulment of marriage? Okay? Pwedeng ang parent or ang legal guardian nitong 20-year-old boy. Okay? Or man. Pwede siya mag-file ng annulment of marriage ng dalawa. Basta hindi pa umaabot ng 21 years old itong lalaki. Okay? Pero pag umabot na ng 21 years old ang lalaki, hindi na sila ang pwede mag-file niyan. Pero si lalaki, pwede pa siya mag-file ng annulment of marriage. Kailan? After attaining the age of 21 years old, within 5 years, pwede siyang mag-file ng annulment of marriage. After that, hindi na pwede. Kasi may prescriptive period na tayong sinusunod. Okay na provided ng law. No parental consent above 18, below 21 years of age. Okay? Mararatify lang ito if both parties, the husband and wife, freely cohabited even after yung 5-year prescriptive period. Okay? If they both freely cohabited as husband and wife, then ratified na po. Hindi na po ito ground for annulment of marriage. So next is unsoundness of mind. Okay, ano ba unsoundness of mind? Ang sabi ng Supreme Court sa Menciano versus San Jose, the parties must possess the mental capacity the law requires for making of a will. Okay, kasi pag gumagawa ka ng will, kailangan alam mo na will ang ginagawa mo. So, same lang din. Pag mental capacity, kailangan alam mo na kinakasal ka. At alam mo kung sino yung pinakapapakasalan mo. The true test is whether the party concerned could intelligently give consent. That is, that he knew what the contract he was entering into is the contract of marriage. Yan po yung nasasabi sa Hoadley versus Hoadley, diba? Okay, Hoadley versus Hoadley. Question, kapag nagpakasal ka ba na lasing ka, voidable ba ang marriage niyo? I mean, nasa katinoan ka ba? The answer is no. Intoxication which results in lack of mental capacity to give consent is equivalent to unsoundness of mind. So, meron kasing intoxication na alam mo pa rin ginagawa mo, pero may degree na intoxication na talagang wasak ka. Hindi mo na talaga alam yung ginagawa mo. So, oo ka na lang ng oo ka na lang ng oo. So, that is considered as lack of mental capacity to give consent. So is yung somnambulism. Okay? At the time of wedding, alam mo ba yung mga somnambulism? Yun yung mga natutulog, tapos naglalakad. Tapos hindi nila alam na naglalakad sila. So, when I was a child, I was somnambulist. No? Nagigising ako nasa kabilang area na ako ng bahay namin. Tulog ako. It is also akin to unsoundness of mind. So, sino ang pwedeng mag-file ng annulment of marriage based on unsoundness of mind? Okay. Number 1, pwede ang sane spouse. Sane ha, yung spouse na nasa katinoan, pwede siya mag-file ng annulment of marriage as long as hindi niya alam na insane yung kinakasalan niya. Okay? Next, pwede din mag-file ng annulment of marriage si relative, guardian, or any person having legal charge over the insane spouse. Okay? But this should be done at any time by either party at any time before the death of either party. So, bago mamatay yung either party. Or, pwede din naman si insane spouse during lucid interval or after regaining sanity, kapag nasa katinoan na siya. Next ground is fraud. Masyado malawak ang ground na fraud. So, in general, Article 1338 of the Civil Code, nasasabi ay, in general, there is fraud when, through insidious words or machinations of one of the contracting parties, the other is induced to enter into a contract which, without them, he would not have agreed to. But in marriage contracts, not all kinds of fraud make the marriage voidable. So, hindi naman po lahat ng panloloko ay nagiging ground for annulment of marriage. The fraud in marriage must be one of those enumerated in Article 46 of the Family Code. So, ano yung mga fraud na nakasaad sa Article 46 of the Family Code? So, kailangan ko ng kodigo dyan dahil hindi na gumagana ang aking memory ng kasintindi nun. So, this is the Civil Code. Medyo nasira na nga lang siya, hindi na siya. Konti lang, nalalagyan ko na ng bagong plastic cover. But this is the Civil Code of the Philippines, okay? So, sa Article 46, ano ba yung mga fraud na nasasaan? Okay, ano ba yung mga nasasaad na fraud? Number 1, non-disclosure of a previous conviction by final judgment of the other party of a crime involving moral turpitude. So, hindi niya inamin sa'yo na na-convict siya by final judgment. May previous conviction siya. Okay? Of a crime involving moral turpitude. Next, concealment of the wife of the fact that at the time of the marriage, she was pregnant by a man other than her husband. Okay. Ito yung mga pinapaako, no? So, hindi naman alam ng lalaki na hindi pala kanya yung pinagbubuntis ng babae. Okay? So, ito yung madalas sa mga teleserye, no? So, next, concealment of a sexually transmissible disease, regardless of its nature, existing at the time of the marriage. So, hindi sinabi ni lalaki or ni babae na at the time na kinakasal sila ay may STD siya, or gonorrhea, or any sexually transmissible disease, okay? Regardless nga of its nature, ay siguro regardless of its nature, basta any sexually transmissible disease na hindi dinisclose can be a ground for annulment of marriage under fraud. Okay? Next, concealment of drug addiction, habitual alcoholism, or homosexuality or lesbianism existing at the time of the marriage. Hindi dinisclose ni lalaki or ni babae na at the time of the marriage, okay, drug addict siya, or habitual yung pagiging lasinggero niya, lasinggera, or na-attract siya sa same sex. Okay? Kasi it's homosexuality or lesbianism existing at the time of the marriage. So, may clause pa, may paragraph pa dito, sinabi ng batas na no other misrepresentation or deceit as to the character, health, rank, fortune, or chastity shall constitute such fraud as will give grounds for action for the annulment of marriage. So, no other misrepresentation or deceit, yun lang talaga yung exclusive na sinabi ng batas. So, kung niloko ka, sinabi sa'yo ng partner mo, habang bago kayo ikasal na mayaman siya. Pero, yung pala nidiscover mo na wala pala siyang, hindi pala talaga siya mayaman. So, that's not a ground for annulment of marriage. Okay? How ratified? Paano ba nara-ratify yan? Okay? Nara-ratify ito by free cohabitation after full knowledge of the facts constituting the fraud. So, kung halimbawa, si babae, after niya nalaman yung mga fraud yung na drug addict pala itong lalaki or may STD na hindi dinisclose sa kanya at the time of marriage, pero sama pa rin siya dito kay lalaki as if they were husband and wife. So this ratifies their marriage, okay? The free cohabitation, hindi pinilit, okay? After full knowledge, so kahit nalaman na niya lahat, mahal niya, diba? So pinanindigan na niya, tinanggap niya buong-buo with whole heart. Okay, so next, force, intimidation, or undue influence. Force or violence. Okay, under the law, there is violence when in order to wrest consent, serious or irresistible force is employed. Okay? Pak! May mga pananakit. Parang pumayag ka, pakasalan mo ako. Ngayon na. Okay? Or intimidation. Okay? Under Article 1335, second paragraph of the Civil Code, intimidation. There is intimidation when one of the contracting parties is compelled by a reasonable and well-grounded belief. A well-grounded fear pala, not belief. Well-grounded fear of an imminent and grave evil upon his person or property, or upon the person or property of his spouse, descendants, or ascendants to give his consent. So, ini-intimidate, no? Wala nga physical violence, pero nai-intimidate siya dahil siguro mas may kaya sa kanya yung papakasalan niya, o yung pamilya na papakasalan niya, ma-influensya. Okay? Next, undue influence. Ayan, yun na nga. Control over one's will. So, in Tiongco versus Matiga, the Supreme Court, these are the facts, okay? A man married a woman because of the threats and armed demonstrations of the brothers of the wife. So, tinakot ng mga kapatid nitong babae si lalaki para pakasalan tong kapatid nilang babae. The wife put up in court the defense. Okay? Kasi nag-file ng annulment of marriage to si lalaki. Siyempre, ang defense ni babae is, the marriage should not be annulled because the policy of the law is to maintain marriage ties. So, ang sabi ng Supreme Court, the marriage should be annulled. It is true that it is the policy of the law to maintain the marriage ties. Okay, totoo naman talaga namang pinangangalagaan ng batas natin ang sanctity of marriage. But when the marriage is effected through duress and intimidation, in this case, di ba, tinakot itong si lalaki, and without the consent and against the will of one of the parties, there are no ties to be preserved. So, yun ang sabi ng Supreme Court. Wala namang ties na ipipreserve, Wala namang sanctity of marriage. Kasi, in the first place, pinakasalan niya lang yan dahil natakot siya sa mga kapatid ni babae, di ba? One example pa, in People versus Santiago. Okay, si A, ni-rape niya si B. And then, forced B to marry him. A had no intention at all of living with B. So, si rapist, wala naman talaga siyang intention to live with the victim, When A was prosecuted for the crime of rape, he offered the marriage as a defense. Okay, sabi niya, pinakasalan ko naman yan So, absuelto na dapat ako sa rape. Should A still be convicted? Yes, A should be convicted. The consent of the girl was vitiated by duress. The marriage ceremony was performed merely as a device by the accused to escape punishment. The marriage is therefore not sanctified by law and constitutes no obstacle to the prosecution of the accused for the offense. Okay, so ang pinoprotektahan talaga ng batas natin is yung may full consent, okay, valid consent ng both parties. But in this case, ginamit yung kasal para maabsuelto si A or sa crime of rape against kay B. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So, okay, when can you file the annulment of marriage based on force, intimidation, or undue influence? So what is the prescriptive period in filing the annulment of marriage based on the force, intimidation, or undue influence? it must be, the prescriptive period is within 5 years from the time the force, intimidation, or undue influence disappeared or ceased. So, dito naman po tayo sa very interesting ground. Impotence or physical incapacity. Okay. What is impotence? Impotence or impotentia copulandi refers to lack of power of copulation and not to mere sterility. Okay? Lack of power of copulation or inability to perform the sexual act. At hindi ito yung dahil hindi magkaanak. Iba po yun. Iba yung hindi magkaanak, iba yung hindi kaya mag-perform ng sexual act. Yun po ang impotency or physical incapacity as a ground for annulment of marriage. So, impotency carries with it sterility. A sterile person is not necessarily impotent. Impotency is a ground to annul marriage because if known to the impotent person, a grievous fraud and injury has been committed. And if unknown, there is a violation of an implied warranty. Okay, so, meron din, in a long line of cases, the Supreme Court held din naman, no, in-explain na nila kung ano yung impotency na to. But in Menciano versus San Jose, again, the test is not the capacity to reproduce, but the capacity to copulate. Okay? In Jimenez versus Canizares, physical incapacity as a ground for the annulment of marriage refers to impotency or the inability to perform the sexual act. Hindi niya kaya makipag-sex, and not to sterility or the inability to procreate. Dito sa Andal and Duenas versus Macaraig, although the husband was already suffering from tuberculosis and his condition then was so serious that he could hardly move, okay, hindi na siya makagalaw dahil may tuberculosis siya, and get up from his bed, hindi siya makatayo. His feet were swollen and his voice hoarse. Yet, that is no evidence of impotency. So, hindi po ebidensya yun na impotent ka. Nor does it prevent carnal intercourse. There are cases where patients suffering from this sickness can do the carnal act even in the most crucial stage. Kahit na sobrang hirap na at talaga namang may pain na, okay, meron pa rin paraan. He can do the carnal act even in the most crucial stage because they are more inclined to sexual intercourse. As an author has said, the reputation of tuberculosis towards erotism is probably dependent more upon confinement to bed than the consequences of the disease. So, syempre, di ba, ano bang kailangan? Bed. So, meron din naman talagang mga, I don't wanna elaborate, but, again, you know naman, pag mga legally married dyan, and alam na natin yon, okay? If there's a will, there's a way. So, the burden of proof of impotency is upon the complainant. Okay? Na kay complainant yun, yung burden of proof of impotency ng partner niya. To prove that the impotency existed at the time of the wedding. So, si complainant dapat ang magpo-prove no, na impotent na tong asawa ko nung time pa lang ng wedding namin. And that it is incurable. Hindi po gumagaling, hindi magagaling, hindi po kaya ng Aspilet, Biogesic, ibuprofen, okay? Hindi gumagaling. And the pleadings must so state. So, dapat nasa pleadings po yun. This is so because the presumption is in favor of the marriage. Again, Philippine laws is protecting the sanctity of marriage. Impotency being an abnormal condition should not be presumed. Okay, hindi po yan hinuhula-hula lang, hindi yan trip ko lang, feeling ko lang, gano'n. The presumption is in favor of potency. The low testimony of the husband that his wife is physically incapable of sexual intercourse is therefore insufficient. Kailangan meron pa rin pong ibang ebidensya to support your claim na impotent yung partner mo. Again, impotency is the inability to perform the sexual act and not the inability to bear a child, okay? Or to yung sterility, hindi po yun. Okay, so I hope it is clear. So when can the injured party file an annulment of marriage based on impotency? Okay, pwede po ito ma-file, ang prescriptive period is within 5 years after the marriage. Okay, so within 5 years after the marriage, pwede po siya mag-file ng annulment of marriage based on impotency of the other party. So, can it be ratified? No, hindi po ito na-ratify according to the law. Okay? So, next ground natin is sexually transmitted disease. This would include AIDS, herpes, syphilis, gonorrhea, hepatitis, and the like, provided they are serious. Okay? Serious. Kailangan seryoso po. Of course, AIDS is not only serious, it is fatal. Okay? So, when can the injured party file? Again, within 5 years after the marriage, pwede po siya mag-file ng annulment of marriage. Okay? So, how voidable marriages may be ratified? Kasi kanina pa ako nagsasabi ng ratification, okay? In general, free and voluntary cohabitation. Kung nagsama na ng free and voluntary cohabitation, this ratifies the voidable marriage. Exception dito yung impotency, okay? This cannot be ratified eh. Okay, kahit magsama sila free and voluntary cohabitation, hindi, according to the law, hindi po ito na-ratify. The period need not be long, okay? However, the cohabitation must be something more than mere living together in the same house or even occupying the same bed. It is the living together of the parties as husband and wife. Hindi lang yung basta nagsama kayo sa bahay. Yun na yung cohabitation. No, kailangan magsama kayo as husband and wife, including sexual relations. So, I will be discussing next time na may legal separation. Kasi yung airtime natin dito ay ilang minutes lang. Okay, so I will be discussing legal separation sa next episode ko para po mas maintindihan at hindi mag-chapsuy-chapsuy ang ating grounds. Okay, and masakit na rin po yung likod ko. Gusto ko nang magkape. Basta I hope may natutunan kayo sa aking vlog-vlogan today. And I enjoy being with you also. And for our Bible verse, Matthew 19 verse 6. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Thank you again for watching, and if you have questions, I will really try my best to answer all of you. Ang dami-dami niyo, but my heart is full of joy when I give advice and help you in your struggles or problems when it comes to your rights. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you will hit the notification bell, subscribe to my channel, and that's it. Thank you.